Lawyers representing former Wajir Governor Ahmed Abdullahi have vowed to go back to court to challenge the ruling by the Supreme Court that upheld the election of his rival Mohamed Abdi.
The lawyers now say that they intend to peg their case on the academic qualifications of the county chief. So what are the issues and what are some of the considerations that the majority ruling made in overturning the decisions of the lower courts that nullified the elections?
Silas Apollo takes a look at the judgments delivered by the judges and which have sharply divided the legal fraternity.
Barely a week after the Supreme Court delivered the ruling on the Wajir gubernatorial race, opinion is still divided on grounds on which the appeal was allowed. Critics of the court say the majority decision failed to consider the facts tabled before court. Lawyer Brian Onderi argues that the majority ruling lacked factual and intellectual honesty. His bone of contention is a failure by the court to determine the authenticity of Governor Mohamed Abdi's academic qualification and whether he was qualified to run for governor. He asks, why did the majority refuse to determine an issue which it held in the ruling permitted adduction of additional evidence to be the single issue for determination? Was the doctrine of judicial avoidance in play? If so, was it rightly invoked, or was it abdication of duty? Ondari argues that the totality of the trial and additional evidence show that the appellant had not even stepped into Uganda despite claiming to be a student at Kampala University. Note that the sole analysis of the evidence is that undertaken by the CJ in dissent in which Lenaola joins. Senior Counsel Ahmed Abdullahi says, and I quote, Governor Mohamed Abdi of Wajir is in office illegally. We are going back to court on Wednesday to remove him. The Supreme Court just declared that his university degree was a pre-election dispute and the High Court had no jurisdiction on that issue. End of quote. So what were the grounds upon which the majority and the minority judges based their rulings? The majority decision states that while the issue of whether Governor Abdi held a degree or not was a matter of concern, such a determination was the sole responsibility of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. And as such, the first respondent, who is former Governor Ahmed Abdullahi, ought to have exhausted all the available mechanisms before seeking the audience of the courts. The majority decision also faults Abdullahi for failing to lodge his complaint before the elections and as such beats the logic on why such a matter should be one to be determined by an election court. This, however, is contrary to the minority opinion held by Chief Justice David Maraga and Justice Isaac Lenaola. Maraga says that all evidence tabled pointed to the fact that the governor's degree was questionable. This includes the fact that there was no evidence of him traveling to Uganda to attend classes at the Kampala University, his name missing on the list of graduates, and the list of students admitted to the university during the time he says he was enrolled. Justice Lenaola, on the other hand, disagreed with the majority decision, which argued that the question of the governor's academic qualification was a matter which ought to have been handled by the IEBC. He argues that since the matter had not been fully dealt with by the IEBC after the complainant, one Abdirahman Mohamed Abdi, failed to follow up the matter, the burden was on the courts, a responsibility he says the lower courts determined. Silas Apollo, NTV.